As foreign ministers from Germany, France, and the UK will meet with Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi today in Geneva in a bid to de-escalate the conflict with Israel. Officials are also expected to discuss a framework for resuming observation of the country's nuclear program. Let's get analysis on all of this with Albert Wolf, Global Fellow at Habib University. Thank you so much for staying up late. Albert, let's talk probabilities here, because it seems overnight has become somewhat more likely that U.S. President Donald Trump is going to pursue the diplomatic route. What do you think?
First, thank you for having me on your program. There's a couple of things to keep in mind. First of all, the talks that are going on in Geneva and the fact that the president said he's going to make up his mind in the next 2 weeks gives the United States time. On the one hand, time to possibly find a diplomatic solution, but also time to put additional American military assets into the region. So this gives the United States time to move assets such as the major aircraft carrier like the Nimitz into the region, along with additional missile defense systems to defend not just Israel, but Gulf states where we have different bases. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that there's the hope Trump will get the deal he's been pushing for with a potential enrichment off-ramp for Iran in the form of a multilateral consortium and concessions from Iran on missiles, as well as ending support for what remains of the axis of resistance in exchange for gradual sanctions relief and an end to the fighting. And the E3, UK, France, and Germany have agreed that Iran would have to provide unfettered access to international inspectors.
Can we talk about the E3 meeting, which is set to kick off in Geneva this morning? Obviously, the Europeans have very little sway over Iran, Israel, and I assume also over U.S. President Donald Trump. So what role potentially could the EU play? What role should it play?
Well, that's a good question. First of all, Trump, had pretty much isolated or kicked the E3 out of the talks. Now, they were part of the Obama administration's attempt to reach a deal. They're part of the Biden administration's. Here's a couple things they can do. The first is that they can provide diplomatic cover for the U.S. and Iran. The second thing is that they can provide any sort of positive inducements that the U.S. may feel are necessary to bring Iran into a deal, but without having to face any sort of domestic or international embarrassment. And then finally, Germany's stance has changed. Germany traditionally was the most dovish country towards Iran. And now with the new Chancellor, Friedrich Merz, who has made a comment along the lines of, Israel is doing the world's dirty work for it, or something along those lines. Germany's hawkish stance can help to reassure Israel.
When it comes to Trump, and let's talk about domestic politics here for a moment, this very much could be a legacy-defining moment. I don't know if you agree with that view here, but interesting comments coming from Steve Bannon yesterday. He said if the U.S. were to strike Iran, it would tear the U.S. apart. Do you agree with that?
No, I don't believe it'll tear the U.S. apart. But it is important to note that getting involved in Iran right now is not popular. I think you probably have heard about the Economist YouGov poll that was released just a couple days ago. 53% of Trump's own voters oppose joining the Israeli strikes. 63% favored engaging in negotiations with Iran. Now, when you look at the entire public, about 60% of the U.S. public felt the U.S. should get involved militarily. So there are splits within Trump's base over this issue. Many of your viewers have probably seen the interview or screaming match between Tucker Carlson and Ted Cruz just the other day. That's sort of what the Republican Party looks like now on this issue.
If he decides not to strike, if he decides to sort of wait it out, or even if he, let's say, declares a red line somewhere, and I'm thinking of the President Obama moment back in 2013 when it comes to Syria, to what extent is Donald Trump's credibility on the line here?
There's a couple of things that this would involve. First of all, there's been a new phrase that's come out, taco. Trump always chickens out. And in some international crises during his first term, such as the problems we had with North Korea, Trump used very belligerent rhetoric. he backed down. He backed down in response to the downing of a UAV by the Iranians. First of all, this was met with domestic disapproval because it damaged America's reputation in the eyes of the public. If this is as bad as when Obama refused to use force against Syria, it could damage our credibility somewhat. It won't make it impossible for us to, do business. It won't make it impossible for us to make credible commitments, but we'll make it more expensive. So it would be damaging in much the same way that Obama failing to live up to the red line he set on Syria back in 2013 hurt American credibility.
Albert.